Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are so excited to be talking to Brian Cortade, the winner of Disney Lorcana Challenge Chicago. Brian, thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, of course. I seen your interview with Frank, and I'm excited to do one myself.
Well, we're excited to have you here and to hear about your Lorcana journey. Before we start, do you want to tell the audience a little bit about yourself and your TCG background?
Yeah, so I started playing card games probably in 2004, so I would have been about 11. I played Yu-Gi-Oh with my dad. That was kind of our thing. I went to my local store, and the guy working was like, "Hey, we have tournaments. Come check this out." And then he taught me how to play. I played Hearthstone professionally, and that's kind of what I did between 2015 and like 2020. And that was like a completely life-changing experience for me. And I'm hoping that, and it already has been, but Lorcana, it's been the same thing. And honestly, it's been one of my favorite games to play, and I've been playing a lot of games for a long time, so it's got the right mix of a lot of the elements of the other games that I think make a successful game and community. I think those two things go hand in hand.
So why Emerald Steel?
In set 3, I played Emerald Steel. At the end of set 2, I kind of played this like yellow steel Tiana aggro deck that I really liked. And in set 3, I couldn't really figure out what I wanted to do. But then I seen a player, Brindle Boar, I think got a deck or worked on a deck similar to another player, Speci, and I kind of seen that list do well, and I was like, oh, this is like another aggro steel type deck, and I kind of was already wanting to play Prince Sean, even though he hadn't been particularly good yet. So I gave that deck a try. That green steel deck's a lot different than this one because this one does run Bucky, and I think that you have the Floodborns, and maybe it's like a little bit more streamlined on how to play it. But I kind of just took the deck to stay with the same colors from set 3 since I'd played it so much, and I played it in Atlanta, and just decided to play that as well in Chicago. It helps that it's also probably what most people had considered before the event, like the best or one of the two best decks, so that made my decision a little bit easier to just stick with the same colors.
So going into the tournament, looking at the meta, which matchups were you kind of excited about and which ones were you hoping to avoid?
Yeah, so first off, my tournament run, I was fortunate enough to, and in any event you're going to play well and get lucky. I was fortunate enough to play against, I think, 6 red purples, 5, or at least 5 in the Swiss, I think. And that's a fantastic matchup for me. Some green steel players are maybe running less of the Ursula 3, but that's that double sings a song, Deceiver of All. But such a good card versus red purple. It almost always clears 2 things. In the previous set, it had to watch out for Pinocchio that tapped it down or exerted it, and then they would take it out. But no one plays the Pinocchio 2 anymore that exerts a character, so Ursula pretty much always sticks and then removes 2 things. And then on the red purple side, they've actually had to opt into playing like Flynn and the 3-mana Sisu, which are really good versus red blue, but they're not so good when Ursula +1 song takes out 2 of them. So I was fortunate enough to play against red purple, which is what I wanted to see. And then I did also have to play against some of the decks I didn't want to see, like blue steel. In the Lorcana challenges where it's 2-game, you have to realize that you're going to split with some people, and you got to be happy when you split with your worst matchup, like I split with blue steel. One of my O2s was against red blue. I think that matchup's pretty close, but it's definitely not one I want to see, like red purple. And then that would just leave the mirror match, which my deck list isn't. In some ways it is good in the mirror, and in some ways it isn't. In the way that it's most obvious to people is that I don't play Grab Your Swords. But in a way that's less obvious that my deck's good in the mirror, I play Flynn, which eats Diablo. And I think on a core level there, like, I don't like the idea of running Grab Your Swords with Babooms, which I only played 1 of this week, but usually I play 2 of. But even the songs in general, and then once you add the Flynn 4, there's not as many board states where it's like, okay, I have a bunch of people, you have a bunch of people, and now my grab your swords is taking out your board. So I was lucky to dodge all the mirrors. I did not play a single mirror on the weekend, which is like, I never would have guessed before the tournament that was the case. And then, my deck list is even better given that the decks I played. Like, I was very happy with my deck choice and the card choices.
So I will say one of the things that we like to talk about when we look at decks is your one of. So you have one of Baboom, and then you have one of Along Came Zeus. What was your thought process behind just adding one of each of those?
So for the Baboom, I usually play 2, but I kind of just have been feeling, and this is the same reason why I didn't want to play Grabber Swords, is that you kind of need all the characters you can get versus red-blue. And for that reason, I just ended up going down to 1 Baboom and not playing the Grab Your Swords. And then for the Zeus, I usually play 2. I like the card in the mirror a lot. It answers a beast. It's not the most efficient removal at taking out a like Diablo, but it can. And then I think you need a certain number of songs in your deck when you're trying to shift Diablo as well. He has to discard a song to get shifted. And I think the final straw for me on the Zeus was I was worried about going up against castles. It's a fantastic card to clear a castle. It's basically a 1-for-1 when it's paired with a Diablo for a castle, and losing a lore to finish off the castle is a small price to pay. And in that same way, actually the Flynn 4, I play 6 4-drops, so I'm actually singing the Zeus earlier than a lot of the green steel lists would be doing. And then in the same way, a Flynn can also attack a castle, and then you can bolt the castle. And the reason why I just highlighted it with the 2 characters that have evasive, so they're not even dying most of the time when you're taking out a castle versus the purple decks. Unless you're in the finals and it's green-purple and they have the Tinkerbell.
So another new card that we saw come out in your deck was Hidden Cove. So can you tell us a little bit about the decision to add that and how it worked for you this weekend?
Yeah, so originally Hidden Cove was a 1 of, but I moved it up to 2. The card's just so good against red-blue and even red-purple and even green-purple. It's actually just really overperformed in a lot of ways, but I wouldn't play 4. Maybe you could even go up to 3. I'm not sure, where I'll land in the future, but essentially, turn 1 you play a Diablo, turn 2 you play a Cove, you put the Diablo on the Cove, and then you shift Diablo, and he's no longer brawlable, which is huge against red-blue. Now he's living. At the end of the game versus red-blue, when they're looking to play Sisu, it basically is a way to preemptively invest ink into protecting your board before they even have the opportunity to remove it. And a lot of the time, when you don't play the Cove, on those turns, you're just committing more characters that die, or you're playing cards that aren't advancing your game plan. Maybe it's Grab Your Swords or whatever it may be, but they aren't helping you close that game out against red-blue, where the Cove actually is going to give your some durability to your people. Whether it's a beast that's no longer Medusa-able, basically whatever it is. Another thing I guess would be just in any matchup where there's a lot of creature combat, or character combat, which you've seen in the finals versus green-purple, it gives 1 attack and 1 health. It's just, it turns a Robin Hood into something that kills a 1/3 Ursula. It's really helps you there as well. And there's a lot of complicated combat with, do I put 3 on the Cove this turn and then my thing dies, and I put 3 into the Cove next turn, but then maybe in the future it's going to help me that their Cove's off the board. It was definitely a tricky card for my opponents to deal with, and I saw that time and time again when they were staring it down. It required extra thought from their side.
So something we'll talk about here in a minute is your preparation for the weekend and all that sort of thing. But while we're talking about your deck, I wanted to ask, was there anything that you learned about your deck this weekend that was kind of new that you might want to adjust in the future? And how do you go about making those tweaks throughout kind of tournaments and competition season?
With Green Steel last set, I played the same deck, at most a 2-card change for about 5 weeks. I feel like I kind of just nailed it. The core of this deck is pretty settled. It kind of builds itself when you have Bucky and you need the Floodborns, and so many of the cards are so powerful. I think for me, usually I'm trying to adapt to the meta, obviously as it changes, but this weekend, all of my cards honestly felt great. I mean, I won, so that's one reason, but I think the first card I'd take out probably is the Zeus. I didn't end up needing it against the castles, and I didn't play very many mirrors. It could be in the future that you see more mirrors and you still want the Zeus, but I wonder, like, if maybe the third Cove or something else isn't better. A lot of people play more than 2 Brunos, which is a card I only play 2 of. That's a card that's also solid in the mirror match. You grab your swords, could get included in the deck. But yeah, I mean, overall, I was pretty happy with the deck, and I think that it's a kind of a tight list. I opted out of running Pegasus. These cards, maybe they could come back in the future and be good in the deck. But yeah, I think for a lot of people, they get tied up in how they could make their deck list a little bit better. But for me, I really try to focus on just playing the deck list I think is good as much as I can, and in-game executing as close to perfect as I can, which is why missing some of the triggers is just keeping me thinking about how I can improve at the game still, and that's a part of my in-person game that's just lacking. I played Hearthstone and stuff, so before that I played physical card games, but this is actually the first time I played a physical card game again in years. And I really enjoy the tactileness of cards. Like, I have no problem moving them, but I'm still getting used to being back in a room with 10 or 2,000 people. It's been great, honestly, though. It's a huge refreshing for me. I work from home. I've been working from home for like 4 years, so it's really like a social community outlet for me, as much as it is a game.
So I really liked one of the things you kind of said about tweaking your deck, and I think it's an interesting thing for a newer player or someone who's new to a tournament. And maybe it's when you come out of a tournament, maybe it's not necessarily about tweaking your deck, but maybe more about tweaking your game, tweaking how you play your deck, and thinking about the triggers that maybe you missed and optimizing how you're playing the deck that's in your hand.
Yeah, I think it's really easy to blame the deck in general or feel bad about your deck choice. It's like such an easy thing to change. You just go get the other cards and then you put them in, and now I start winning, right? But for me, I think it's really about just the plays in general, looking back on it. From my past, a Hearthstone game, something that I've always internalized, that's someone who I look up to in Hearthstone. Life coach said at one point was that a Hearthstone game only lasts 8 minutes, and most of them you don't even get 20 seconds of development. So when I'm in a position in a tournament that I think is interesting, if I'm at a locals or something, like, I'll make a note of it just to go back and think about it, because I think thinking about an interesting turn for 5 to 10 minutes is more valuable than sometimes just like playing 2 quick games or whatever it is. In this game, the mulligan's very forgiving, and I mean, it's amazing. I love it. But the end result of that is that the decks get their optimal curve pretty often. Like, in the finals or whatever, I have Bucky. You're gonna have Bucky 66% of time, so you're seeing a lot of the same lines. I've heard people like compare it to chess more than it is some of the other card games, because like in a matchup between 2 decks, there's only so many ways they can pan out, and they kind of see it like that. But yeah, so I think just like going back and really focusing on the decisions you thought were hard is a great way to improve. But you have to take the time to do that after the game. Usually you're not able to really like dive in during a game. So I have like a folder of screenshots, and I probably have like over 3,000 screenshots of board states, and like the next morning I'll wake up and like look at them over coffee, honestly, and just like think about them again. And most of the time, if I think it's hard, I'd say about like 30% of the time I look back at it and I made the wrong decision. But I knew like in the moment, like, this is really a hard decision and it's really interesting, so I just like file it away for later to look at.
No, I'd love, one of the things that I love to talk about, because this is my first TCG, I'm more of a
Mm-hmm.
casual player, is learning about how really talented players prepare for these tournaments. So can you talk us a little bit through your process, maybe from the start of this current meta, like how you started thinking about building your deck, and then how you just get ready for tournament day, like the week leading up to it?
Yeah, so for me, I was really honed in on Atlanta, which was set 3, chapter 3, even though chapter 4 was out. And I didn't get that much time to practice Green Steel, honestly, for chapter 4 as much as I would have liked. But in general, I think one thing I always advise people on is that it's, in my opinion, it's best to play a deck you're comfortable with and that Like, even if, people think, like, that deck is bad or that deck can't do well, if that's what you're comfortable with, I really do believe, like, that's what you should, try to bring. And I don't think it's smart to try to, like, audible last second to a different deck, or, switch off and play something that you might not be comfortable with. And the different decks in Lorcana play very differently. They're different play styles, and even for somebody who's really good, like, I can sit down and play red blue, yeah, and I'm gonna play it well, but I'm not gonna play it, as well if I took and spent more time on it, having just played green steel for a month and a half. As far as actually, like, preparing and going into the weekend, one piece of advice is trying not to room with anybody who snores. Unfortunately, I didn't succeed in that this weekend, but luckily it didn't matter. But no, on a more serious note, just I think you're not going to always win, no matter who you are, and these events are huge. And really, like, I think it's important that you're going and you have the right mindset and you're playing for the right reasons. And I'm having a blast with the game, and in Atlanta, I wasn't able to top, but I was, I wasn't going to be able to prepare much for this one. I was kind of down about that, but you can only change, you can only control what you can change. And I think just, like, going, and I loved what Frank said in the last one, just, going to play and worrying about the game. It's just, I think it's a relief to finally, like, approach a game like that. Like, I have a job now, so this isn't what I'm doing for my living, and it's relieved, like, a lot of stress, honestly. Like, about performing and how well I'm gonna do. And since then, things were already going well when I played card games, but they're going even better now. And I think just having a positive outlook on what you can do. I mean, there's a lot of people that went there now. They ask you, like, have you been to a tournament before? Raise your hand. Are you new? Raise your hand. Like, look around. Like, there's plenty of new people. Like, you're not alone. And there's no reason that you can't play just as well as any of those people, let alone the people who've also been playing other games or have been to other tournaments. And in Chicago, I don't have the percentages, but just from sitting there, and in my first round opponent, it was their first tournament ever too. So, a lot of the people going, they're just as nervous or unsure of what deck to play as you are. And, once you make your decision, you just got to be focused on how to execute with it and confident that you made the right decision and not spending, your brain power doubting yourself.
So you talked a little bit about, you had such little time between rounds. You talked about on day 2, you maybe had like 15-minute breaks between these long 70-minute rounds. How do you reset yourself to get mentally ready for that next round, kind of shed what happened and move forward?
It's definitely tough. I mean, I struggle with it sometimes, but the next round is going to get paired, and you're going to have to go sit down against another person. And one of the things for me is, like, even if my last round went poorly, I want to bring not only a positive attitude for myself into the next game, but also just, like, the next person I play with, I want them to have a good experience. So I don't want to be like grumpy, when I sit down. I'm like, oh, everything's awful, and I just lost my last round, and that's just not what I'm there for. But yeah, no, it was in Atlanta. I also played a lot of mirror matches. But it was just honestly awesome to see, even while I was splitting my rounds and going 1-1, just to see people excited and playing like a deck that I enjoyed, honestly. I didn't expect Green Steel to be so popular there in Atlanta, but it was. And for this tournament, I think that Atlanta kind of got me in the right mindset, make it through Swiss a little bit more positively. Not just my record, but my mentality.
So one, can you describe your first 4 turns with this deck and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, so a lot of people who are playing Green Steel are like, oh, I look at my hand and I'm like, does it have Bucky? No, everything goes back. But that's not my approach to the matchup necessarily. Like I talked earlier about the red-purple matchup. And in that matchup, for instance, it's completely reasonable to not take a Bucky line and to keep Ursula Deceiver of All with a spell. I mean, you know that their power line that they're looking for is 1 drop into Flynn, into the dragon, into the castle. And castle's a good card and it's going to gain some lore, but if you're able to actually remove the 2 characters that they have on board and they aren't able to put anyone inside the castle, then it ends up, just being 2 lore a turn, which is a lot more manageable than lore and cards. And then, of course, if you're able to get the Bucky shift line, like that's awesome. You go Diablo, you go Bucky, you shift. That's great. It definitely depends on the matchup, but I would say that the trickier part about Green Steel that most people aren't doing is that there's specific card combinations that you can see in your mulligan that make it possible not to have to opt into that like all or nothing Floodborn line, like the Ursula one I just said, but that's only one of them. If you have like an Ursula 2, an Ursula 3, and then you maybe have like Shut and Chill, and your opponent is red blue, and let's say they mulliganed like 6 cards and you're on the draw, like this happened to me in top 32, I think. And when your red-blue opponent's mulliganing 6 or 7, the chance that they get multiple songs in the current deck list is pretty high in their hand. Versus if they like keep 6 and put 1 back, it's like, okay, you kept Popsicle Hero, you put back your B prep and you're going first, so I'm not going to be able to Ursula 2, you're 1 jump ahead. So you have to have a how far I'll go, otherwise I'm not hitting something. But if you are able to take in the information that you've been given in the game, like that they mulligan 6, and then that there's a higher chance that they'll actually have multiple songs. And basically what I'm just trying to get at is that if you're able to take a song with that Ursula 2, and then you're able to use like Sudden Chill with Ursula 3 on turn 4 or 5, and maybe they haven't had the chance to get a Hiram with a Popsicle because they mulligan 6, so they have to get to it, they don't have it, otherwise they would have kept it. Then like all of a sudden you can run them out of cards before they're even getting to their power plays. Versus if they mulligan 7 and I had like those Ursulas, I'd probably just put them back and look for the Bucky line, because I know like I'm gonna need to go up against Popsicles and Hiram and that whole 9 yards. So that's not exactly what you asked, but I feel like if I were to just be like, oh, well, you play a 1-drop and then you play Bucky and then you play a 3-drop Floodborn and then you do a 4-drop Floodborn and a 5-drop Floodborn. I mean, my deck does have that, and I'm not going to tell you that I didn't even try to make it more likely. I mean, I'm playing 6 4-drop Floodborns where most people aren't playing that many, like 3 Jafar, 3 Flynn. I upped my 1-drop count to 10 with the 2 extra 1/3 Flynns, which I think are interesting cards. Makes my matchup against red purple a little bit better because the Flynn actually answers the 2/1 Chernobog's followers that's popular. The Flynn doesn't die to grab your swords, the Flynn doesn't die to boom. Against red blue, the 1/3 Flynn is actually kind of a standalone threat, because if they're low on cards, you can shift the 4 Flynn if you draw it, and now you're questing for a lot. So they might pull the trigger on a Medusa earlier or a Sisu earlier. So just in general, like I was really trying to achieve the I'm gonna play something on 1. With the Cove, I actually have 14, or 12, my bad, 1 drops. So I'm gonna try to play something on 1, 2, 3. I guess another, uncommon line, or that something that might not be obvious at first, is just how you actually need to play Shift Diablo, since you can pitch a song to bring it out at any point. It's got a lot of options, like, do I do it now? Do I do it later? A lot of times, you got to be mindful of cards like Brawl, and can I get them to use it before I play like my Diablo out? That's good. So like one way to do that is you play Diablo on 1, you play Bucky on 2, you don't shift Diablo yet, you actually wait till 3, you develop maybe, if you were really good, 2 Diablos. If you're not as good, maybe an Ursula 3 and a Diablo, and then all of a sudden now there's 2 threats that they want to Brawl, and they're not able to pick both, and you just got to look at what you've given up to do that. Maybe your Diablo didn't draw a turn sooner, but at the same time, it was going to get 1 draw and then get brawled, and now you've preserved your other resources. I think in general with Emerald, one of the things that's hard is keeping characters on your board, even when it seems like they might not be useful for you, because cards like Raging Fire require you to have characters on your board. And even in last set, it's really easy to just quest a Merfolk and think like, I'm going to gain 2, and then they're just going to discard, and that's what the card does. But sometimes you actually have to hold it back because you need that 3rd character for Raging Fire, whatever it is. And even against like Red Blue and kind of like the late game stages, sometimes like keeping your quests, like not questing and keeping your people alive so that you'll be able to kill a Medusa, so now all your people can start going sideways. Like that can be really powerful, and that's one of the things with Green Steel I think a lot of people struggle with, is just finishing out a game. It's not, you don't get to quest with Bucky. It's not like the aggro Green Steel from before where everything quests for 2 and you're beating them before they B-prep. Like majority of Green Steel games where you're not discarding their hand, they're going to get to their removal. So every lore kind of matters in squeaking that out.
I just like the way you think about your deck in the game is so complex and deep and like circular and 3-dimensional. It's so cool to listen to you talk about it. I'm gonna have to listen to everything you just said again to like totally digest it, but that was really fascinating and so cool. Thank you for like walking through all of that.
Yeah, just not getting too much in your own head. Just like I said earlier, everyone's in the same boat. Like, yeah, I've played forever, but I go to my locals and I lose games. I lost a game in Atlanta. I lost a few games in Atlanta to people who were new, kids. I lost to kids. Just everyone, has a shot to beat everybody. That's kind of like the beauty of card games. And, there's a lot that I'm doing, maybe that's really good in Lorcana, like the ink decisions and stuff. But part of the beauty of the game is the simplicity. And that's kind of one of the things that attracted me originally coming from Hearthstone, is that, I do enjoy the complexity of some of these other games where you can interact during your opponent's turn. But I think that those games ultimately are a lot less easy to pick up, and they don't they're just more complicated in a way that, yes, it like adds some level of skill, but Lorcana is way more than deep enough, in my opinion, to make up for that. And I also think like that doesn't matter if you're on the play or the draw. You can have a chance in the game. Like purple decks, which red purple has been notoriously good throughout the history of the game. Like there's no doubt like that deck is a lot better on the play than it is on the draw, but I actually think there's some matchups where you're better off being on the draw. The Green Steel Mirror actually I think is one of them. Like, yeah, there's these Green Steel hands that are just incredible on the play, but when the game isn't that, having like the extra card in your hand can make a huge difference in that matchup, whether it allows you to shift your own Diablo and have a song still to answer their Diablo, or whatever it is. I just think that just not getting too focused on what you don't have and focusing on what you what you're there to do, and that's just to play your best.
So, you've won a Lorcana challenge. So what is next for you? Are you doing more challenges? Kind of what's on the horizon?
Yeah, I haven't really decided yet. I still got to take some time to make a tweet and kind of recap my experience and shout out everybody who's helped me along the way. It's gonna be maybe like a long thread. I did content when I was in Hearthstone. I mean, I played on a team. You're kind of like required to do that at that point, and I kind of took a back seat from like social media and that kind of stuff. But I think that now that this has gone so well, I kind of want to get back involved. A lot of people might think like, oh, it's people do content for the money or whatever, but I come from like in Hearthstone, like the game was huge and streaming numbers were unbelievable, and no, even if you're the biggest Lorcana streamer right now or whatever content creator, like you're only gonna be making so much money.
That's true.
And what drives me more is that just being a good person for people to look to learn about the game and grow the community. Even like my locals, I try to go as much as I can, and for a lot of better players, like they might not be getting a lot of experience at their locals or whatever, but I still think it's good to go. And even just last night I played in a tournament already. I didn't even take like a single day off, and someone beat me and they were really excited about that. And that's like awesome. Like I don't care about losing, like it's just another tournament, but for them it's a huge deal. Like even after winning, I have a lot of card game experience, but I've had like over 20 friends who are going to start playing now, like that I have from other games. Like I have 3 downstairs in my house playing right now. They just learned. I just taught them the game. And that's really what it's more of what my goal is moving forward. Like I'm going to be at the challenges. I'm always going to try to win them and play my best, and I qualify for continentals and all of that. But I think that for me the future is just trying to I guess just assist in however I can with growing the community and helping people just get to play and appreciate the game. Yeah.